What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Favale, coming at you with the one, the only, the certified fantabulous Mr. Grant Hughes. Hardwood Knocks has gathered you all here today so that we can talk about why every single major NBA contender is not going to win the championship. This is actually us just looking at our biggest would-be concerns for each contender, and then we will decide what level of alarm we have for each of them as we go throughout this entire process. We'll alternate the order of contenders. We don't know who's going to pick what first, but this will be a fun we've moved into firmly into the big picture portion of the regular season because so many of the games just don't matter at this point. There's still a ton of playoff seeding happening. The big games, I was really excited to watch Spurs Pistons the other night. But there's just sort of I know Rockets Warriors, I saw the end, ended up being a good game. That was one where it's, right, no Kristaps, no Steph.
Yeah.
But we're just like, what are we doing? It wasn't one that I was amped up to watch, but now did spotlight some of the concerns that we'll probably have for the Houston Rockets who fall into this exercise. But Grant, how are you doing first and foremost?
Well, I also watched Spurs Pistons last night as we're recording this the following morning. And give me that all the time. I just I think that's because coming off their first meeting, which was maybe the game I enjoyed most, regular season game this season, and the one I've kind of spent the most time thinking about. This one snuck up on me. I'll admit it. I didn't realize until yesterday morning that they were going to play. I was like, yes, that's the game I want to watch all the time. This was a very different version of that than the first game, but I just to your point. It's so hard to find games right now that are can I learn something from this that is going to matter for my analysis of the season and the eventual champion? That one did. That's what you want.
Yeah, for sure. And even that was just the caveat was, okay, Jalen Duren getting into foul, what did he get? 4 fouls, very early on.
Yes.
And so that was a big one. But Asar Thompson going down with the ankle injury, and then Ron Holland was injured by the end of the game. But you saw enough to kind of understand the theory of what each team was going to try and do. But even there's always those caveats I guess throughout the year, there's always those caveats. Knicks Thunder the other night, though. Why was that game on it was equitable because both teams were on the second end of a back-to-back. But why was that game on the second end of a back-to-back? That's something in the schedule you'd like to root out. But even if you root it out, it's, okay, the Thunder still just don't have Jalen Williams or AJ Mitchell. And what are we going to learn from it? How much can we really learn from the Thunder? The Thunder rule. Who knew?
Yeah, there was more in those. Those are the one tier down from a Spurs Pistons type of matchup right now, because you might learn something about the Knicks. They were full strength. I mean,
I have a
potentially. I know your mind is made up about the Knicks, so you're not going to learn anything.
No.
The rest of us.
I have a take, and it doesn't really belong in the Knicks or Thunder session. I don't think, and I say this as a Knicks fan, I don't want to listen to podcasters, writers, hear the head coach complain about the way that fouls are called when Jalen Brunson is on your team. Just I don't want to hear it from the Thunder because Shea is on their team. First of all, if you're going to complain in that, then the refs cost us this game, that's my first clue that you are, or at least on this particular matter, a deeply unserious person. I won't listen to it. I won't. I'm not the type of person to mock people, and if I do, I'll say it to them, but I don't need to dunk on you. But that's my first clue. The rest of Mike Brown's press conference, that little jab at Shea, he does a really good job convincing refs. Dude had 7 free throws that game. So I just that stuff is, it's a pet peeve of mine.
Your first point on that is the most salient one, which is dude, Jalen Brunson is at least as foul baity and grifty as Shea is. So you don't get to call out the other team's guy for doing similar things in a slightly different way. Oh yeah, I'm so with you. I know we're already on a tangent, but
how many viewers did we lose?
If you're talking about the refs as the most important factor in anything, I just I guess it's possible that on some isolated case you're right, but I'm not interested anyway, because it's just lazy and it's conspiratorial and
and the thing,
it's
you
not
need to show me for 47 and a half minutes that everything was step for step equal otherwise to say that this cost you the game. It's just the refs are never going to cost you. I'm sure if you're going to be on the take But that's another conspiracy theory that we don't need to go down the road. I can't listen to those arguments. And they're also just like, even if you debunk them, and there was things going around about one of the calls that people were upset about in that Knicks Thunder game specifically about, no, like this was a foul. And it's, well, no, but it's the other stuff too. It's like, I can't. But that's not why we're here.
Yes.
We had to narrow down the list of teams that we considered contenders. How do you go about, like, do you have a guiding question when because if you really think about it long enough, you could probably talk yourself into saying, oh, there's like 15 teams that but like, I could envision the Hornets coming, as the one example, just coming out of the Eastern Conference.
It's weird that your head went there first, but
best team in the league for more than a quarter of the season. Why wouldn't it?
So yeah, let's frame it this way. Originally looking at this, I think based just on where sort of the odds cut off, you could get to like 11. That was going to include the Lakers and Sixers. Sorry to those fan bases, you're not contenders in the way that we're going to consider that. So I guess there's some subjectivity there. We could have, you got to make the cutoff somewhere. To me, I guess I'd say you're a contender if, without some shocking stroke of luck or totally unforeseen set of circumstances, you could win the title this year and we would not be blown away. That's a pretty loose standard. I think maybe the true contender class should probably be a little narrower, but this is still, as we'll get into it, I think all of the teams we'll discuss here fit into that category. Not, I'm trying to think, like, I do think, even like, just to say the Sixers or Lakers, to use the two sort of like last cuts here, if they won the title this year, either of them, I would need a really deep dive if you time traveled and it's the middle of June and I say, Dan, the Sixers won the title, you would have some questions. Whereas if I said Minnesota won the title, to use a team that's like firmly in here, you'd be like, yeah, well, two conference finals, like, okay. Pretty good run, little surprising, but I'm not blown away here. Anything to add to that as far as the categories, or before we just sort of discuss like what we're actually the way that we're going to poke holes in these contenders?
I have a hard and fast rule that if you make a trade at the deadline that specifically to save Josh Harris money, I won't put you on the list. And so the Sixers not making it fits with that rule.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad it fit both of our rules then.
So why don't you pick the first team we will talk about? Right. Where are we going?
You mentioned the Spurs. Let's just start there, because this is maybe the easiest thing to dismiss. For me, it's too soon. And I don't have a great statistical argument against them winning the title. I think that, just to stay on that topic, that second meeting against the Pistons was pretty eye-opening. Wemby's defense was just, it's hard unless you're watching a full game of Wembanyama. I think it gives you so much more of a sense of like what he's doing out there defensively than seeing the highlight blocks, and because just the sheer number of instances where the opposing team has what should be a close range attempt and they just don't even consider taking it, and that leads to a kick out or a panic move or whatever. His blocks are incredible. This is not a new argument. Like his impact on the types of shots teams are willing to take, I've never seen anything close to it. And then he's learning the Giannis stuff where he's just driving and getting fouled. Like he fouled Jalen Duren out of that game effectively by just taking it to the basket, and
which
swiping
novel
up
approach,
with a hand
throwing
on
him the ball in the post. Where I'm sure old heads love that one where they were trying to get Jalen Duren in foul trouble. Yeah,
right. So here's the stat here, which again I cited him last time. His newsletter is the best. Tom Ziller was looking at this issue a few weeks ago. Here's the salient point. Of the last 15 NBA champions, only one of them won the title without securing at least one playoff series win in the previous 5 years. That team was the bubble Lakers that had LeBron, who'd had plenty of playoff experience and series wins under his belt by that point. So like triple asterisk next to that. Basically, you can't win a title if you haven't won at least a single playoff series with that core in the previous 5 seasons. So the Spurs might buck that trend. They look so dominant, and you can just see they have in Wembanyama the unsolvable thing. Like, they can win different ways. I'm getting into the case for them, but does that can we just dismiss that as like, that's dumb? The Spurs are a different team than any of the predecessors you're talking about. Who cares if they've got playoff experience, let alone a win? Look how good they are.
I assign more value to this for the Spurs than I do to people have said it about Detroit. To where I know that they didn't win a playoff series last year, but the Pistons have their playoff scars to me. I don't know that there's a difference between they made it to the second round versus they pushed the Knicks to the brink in the first round who ended up being in the conference finals. And it's not just about Wemby's played in big games before. I would worry more so about, okay, well, what does, if you're reliant on Dylan Harper, what does Steph Castle look like in a playoff setting? But even Steph Castle's concern for me, my biggest concern for the Spurs might be, well, how are defenses going to actually treat Stephon Castle in the playoffs rather than they need the collective experience to overcome that? I would come closer to dismissing it more so than not, but you also can't write off the trends of, well, this might be a special circumstance, but it's not LeBron on the bubble Lakers. LeBron has 3 titles by that point already.
And I mean, like, I really do think, and this isn't analytical at all, except there is this stat we just laid out, this historical stat. I just really think that it's not just that, well, you haven't won a playoff series, therefore you can't win a title. It's like there's all these other things that you learn about yourself in the like that the Pistons kind of learned last year, to use your example, even though they didn't win that series. They could have won that series. The Spurs don't know yet, like, okay, we're going to get deep into a series. Teams are guarding Castle or Harper a certain way. What's our solve for that? Like, they just haven't had to deal with that over the course of a series. Like, what if Champagnie and Vassell, who basically won the first Spurs Pistons meeting, what if that one of them is cold? Like, what if one of them gets picked on, probably Vassell, defensively? Like, you haven't gathered enough information. It's not just like there's a rule and you can't advance farther until you take this baby step. It's like, no, the reason that teams don't go from 0 to champion is because the process of kind of diagnosing your flaws and like finding the right fixes. And honestly, for the Spurs in particular, just like natural maturation and growth. Like, we really think a second-year guy in Castle, who I love beyond measure, and Harper as a rookie are going to be playing, like, I don't know what, the third and fifth or sixth most important roles on a championship team that goes through all these plays. It's just like, it's too much too soon. But I would say, tell me what you think about this, because I was thinking about this the other day. If you just kept this exact roster as it is and like aged it up 3 years, so you have Castle in his 5th year and Harper in his 4th, and Champagnie and Vassell haven't totally, like, this roster as it exists today, right now, just aged up, I think, just absolutely as a champion. I don't know if they need to add anything other than experience.
I feel like you could still. I wonder if they have enough just complementary shooting, because if you age it up, are we just assuming that Steph Castle and Dylan Harper are more reliable in those? Because even they need like
or at least one of them. Maybe one of them is.
Sure, but even then, I would still be. They need kind of another wing or combo forward who does it. Because if you're aging them up, Harrison Barnes is only going to get older there. Also, by the way, everybody be careful when you are taking your naps, is all that we have learned. So
when you get that age, yeah.
And they have Julian Champagnie, obviously, but there's also, like, you look at their roster and it's, do we really need, like, Luke Cornett, valuable for sure, Wemby, but like, you have Bismack Biyombo and Mason Plumlee and Kelly Olynyk all on this roster. We couldn't have done something else.
I guess I just mean the young core. I believe in the core.
For sure. Even one of the concerns, I saw some people talking about it. I think it was of the Jared Dubin and Mo DeKeel podcast. I can't remember the name of it, but they were wondering whether Wemby's going to be able to log playoff type of minutes when he doesn't necessarily log those regularly throughout the course of the season. And then he just goes and plays. What did he play? 38 minutes against the Pistons the other night.
It was notable, like how much more he was on the floor than usual.
And that's the other thing terrifying.
With Wemby, yeah, that's terrifying. I think too. Can't you imagine? Maybe it's the first round, maybe it's the second, where if Wembanyama has a flaw, it's at this point in his career, it's still that, like, I'm not sure the Spurs know the best way to use him offensively, and I do think a lot of teams will be able to make things hard enough for him as a scorer to where, because the Spurs actually do need him to be a major offensive threat for them to kind of have a playoff caliber attack. Defensively, I think they're going to be great. I don't think there's a solution for them, but I can imagine part of that learning curve being, okay, here's what we need to do with Wembanyama in a playoff series offensively. Here's what teams are going to try to knock him off his game offensively. Now we're ready for it in year 2 or 3 or 4 of this, dynastic, early dynasty kind of thing.
I'm gonna go. So let's try and give these a alarm scale of 1 to 10.
Okay.
I'll just say medium 5 because I don't want to. In the moment, I'm looking at this team and saying, yeah, 2. But I can't just reject the historical trend. But by the way, another Tom Ziller stat from his newsletter: they have the second best record in the league against like top 3 seeds. I think the
Yeah.
Pistons have the best record, and then it's the Spurs, and it's we could say but you could also make the case the regular season isn't the playoffs, which is
Mhm.
fair. But I'll go 5, or maybe to some respect like a 4.5, just to tip my cap
Yeah.
to what this team
I don't
is.
really know what to do with this because I don't think they are going to win it this year, and I'm more so than literally any other team on this list. Like that's okay by me because they're not
Right.
supposed to, and
The
their
stakes
runway is
aren't
so
the same.
long. There's no stakes at all. I would say I'll just join you at a 5 because I don't really know what kind of concern level to put on this team given where it is in its growth trajectory.
Let's just go to the team they just played, and also
Okay.
another younger team that's just absolutely dominating this year. The Pistons. I worry about. I want to say their offense, but if we want to get a little bit more granular, I think it's just their ability to generate easy opportunities
Mm,
in the half court. And you look at all the players they have, there's just not a solve on the roster. I really like Jenkins. Tobias Harris has had some big moments for them. Duncan Robinson is entirely way too important to this team, and I mean that as a compliment to Duncan Robinson for the way he opens up the floor. Non-Cade players on the Pistons are in the 8th percentile of three-point shot making. That's per B-ball index. You look at the quality of looks that they're getting in the half court, their rim rate declines a ton when Cade Cunningham isn't on the floor. Looking at what Cade has to do specifically, I'm not sure that he's had a high quality shot all season.
right.
These numbers, even when you watch the Pistons, you feel it. But Grant, these numbers are insane. He is in the 2nd percentile of shot quality at the rim, the 30th percentile of paint shot quality, the 22nd percentile in overall mid range shot quality, and the 11th percentile in 3-point shot quality. Now let's isolate the rim and 3-point looks. There's only one other player who has a worse collective shot quality in those 2 areas, or as bad of a shot quality in those 2 areas as Cade Cunningham. It is your MVP pick, LaMelo Ball. That is, this is just, things are never
Which,
going to
by
get.
the way, LaMelo Ball's terrible shot quality is entirely self-created because he just takes the one-footed threes against 2
Well,
guys because he likes them. Well,
yes,
pretty
but
different.
also until recently, and especially when you look at the basket, it's just like the attention that he's going to command.
Yeah,
But yeah, you're right. I wonder, there should be a self-inflicted
that's just a
shot quality
funny
metric.
stat.
That in Cade's case, though, it is
Mhm.
not even close
No.
to self-inflicted. It's a symptom of the rest of the roster. And so I find myself wondering, they're not going to play Ron Holland, Asar Thompson, and Jalen Duren together a ton. And when they have, their offensive rating is actually through the roof this year. But their league average and first chance offense, I I do sort of wonder if a team decides to really sell out on Jalen Duren coming out of a screen, what is like Detroit's second best offensive option? Like if Cade doesn't, and even for Cade, if he can't get the ball to Jalen Duren, what is his second best
Mhm.
option? So it's just, or a third best, because the first best is probably just Cade taking a shot himself. Their defense is incredible. You just can't get to the rim
Mhm.
against them if everyone's going to be healthy. They do a good job of they're going to get out and be opportunistic in transition. But I look at this team, especially if you're not even going to get the type of rim finishing you want from Asar Thompson, or free throw volume, or just like other guys who can come in and draw a ton of fouls off rip in the half court. I I just don't know what this offense is going to look like in the playoffs. I think it's going to be a slog. I think they're built to win anyway. I still would have liked to have seen them done more at the trade deadline other than get Kevin Huerter, who hasn't
Man.
played a ton, to address it. And the other counter they could do, and I just don't know, I don't know if you think they could get away with this a ton in the playoffs, is their offensive rating is in fact through the roof when it's Duncan Robinson, Jenkins, and Cade on the court. I just don't know, well, how many minutes of that can you carve out in
Man.
postseason settings?
Yeah, so I had a couple thoughts. Again, we'll stop talking about Spurs Pistons, but like it happened last night, so it's top of mind. That when the Pistons really needed a bucket, which was most of the game, really the best they could do consistently was a Cade Cunningham self-created 2-point jumper off the dribble where he creates space and has to shoot a contested 17-footer, which like those are exactly like that's the best they can do sometimes. And this is a Spurs defense that's impossible, so file that in there too. But those are the exact type of shots that if Cade wants to shoot 20 of those in a game, every playoff defense will just be ecstatic. Because even that's just a super low expected value shot. The other thought I had while watching Kevin Huerter come in the game was what a half measure.
Oh, he's on this team.
Well, that too. It's just what was the thinking that Kevin Huerter, not to pick on him, but a player of that type, like fringe rotation guy on most good teams who can be an offensive plus, was the thinking that he's enough to alleviate the cramped spacing and the shot creation issues like that? Because if it was, come on, like that's what small time thinking. If you wanted to make the case for why this team needed to trade for Michael Porter Jr., you saw it against the Spurs because there just wasn't another real threat out there. And I had that thought when specifically there were minutes with Jenkins and Cade and Karis LeVert, who in theory, or at least long ago, was viewed as someone that could kind of create some shots for himself and for others. And that's about the best. Like Marcus Sasser showed up in that game for a minute because they needed to find some shooting. This is what we're doing. The Pistons, I think, are good enough at what they do well to win a series or two. I feel pretty good about that because they have such clear strengths in other areas. But this is just not an offense that is going to survive the playoff gauntlet. I don't see how it happens with the non-threats they have and the non-creators that they sort of have to play with to do all the other stuff that makes them good. So they're just kind of stuck. The ceiling just isn't high enough.
Right. And I think the problem where you run into is looking at specific matchups where it feels, I would say, Cleveland and Boston specifically, especially Boston that's going to have Jason Tatum in there, their ability to go off on offense against any particular defense and the 3-point shot making they have on their rosters. And you could maybe even say this with I'm not being facetious here. If you run into Charlotte in the first round, teams that could maybe get out to these double-digit leads and then put even more pressure on you to make these decisions of, well, how much do we skew toward offense with our lineups versus staying with our base rotation? I'm going to go on a scale of 1 to 10 here. I'm going to 7.5 to an 8 feels like the range. They should be the favorite to come out of the East still, but it's just, they just don't have a margin for any type of error on the offensive end. As good as their defense absolutely is.
As I'm trying to find a number, I'm weighing the fact that we're going to have a similar issue with at least one other and maybe two other teams just off the top of my head. So I'm trying to weigh how severe the Pistons offensive issue is against a couple of other teams. My first thought was 8 because I think this is an issue.
I do have one team with a similar issue that is indeed higher than an 8 officially.
I think I know who it is. Maybe we should talk about them next just because it's kind of a natural flow. I think if they get beaten, this is why it will be. And I almost can't think of another reason other than injury, for why the Pistons will come up short. So I'll give it an 8 and just move on there. I think I'm just going to go where you're leading me here. And maybe this will be quick since the issues are similar. Let's go down to the Houston Rockets, who have had some struggles as a late game offensive team. They have similar issues with some of the guys that make them so good at what they're good at, just are not useful offensively in a playoff setting. Talking about Amin Thompson, Alperen Şengün, look. We all want more reliance on Reed Shepherd, and he's playing
more.
Nights. Yeah,
to even Udoka's credit, he is playing more.
I mean, so I assume you're gonna go with this as an even more significant like the panic level with respect to Houston's offense is higher than it is for Detroit's, because Houston does not have its Cade Cunningham to just set a high floor. Like the wheels can really fall off offensively because Fred VanVleet's not there. Reed Shepherd has not been given the opportunity to be ready, but I would feel comfortable still saying he's not ready to just be the reason that Houston is good on offense by himself, or at least the main reason, which it feels like at this point he almost will have to be. So this team does have Kevin Durant. I mean, I guess I'm maybe like not acknowledging that enough in setting the offensive floor, but the numbers are what they are in terms of their overall offensive rating in the half court, their late game stuff. If you subtract the offensive rebounding dominance that they still have continued to have without Steven Adams, like this just isn't a good offense. So that I mean, I know you're ready to talk about them because you were kind of pointing to them, but I'm way more concerned about Houston's offense in a playoff setting than I am about Detroit's, which is saying something.
And I think it just comes down to, and this is maybe it's a little bit of an indictment, like against Reed Shepherd. I just don't know that he's had enough of an opportunity to fully cook. Uh, You have Cade Cunningham in Detroit. That player is not. Yes, you have Kevin Durant, who's just not. He's not going to get to the basket as frequently as Cade Cunningham at this point. He's not the passer that Cade Cunningham is going to be. And so you have that huge variable in Detroit in their favor that you just don't have in Houston right now, because even if Reed Shepherd is going to be on the floor in crunch time, this is still someone that how much agency over the offense is he going to get in those minutes? It's going to take, does Alperen Şengün need to foul out for him to be third in the pet? Like you might still be more inclined to go with like rely on Amen Thompson there. And he's not going to have the status to like not give the ball to Kevin Durant, which is just so often their default. And you look, they'd started off hot in this category, but they've now dropped to 21st in first chance offense. And I'm honestly shocked it's still that high. It feels like it should be lower when you're looking at the way that they've played in the late game play calling. They're 19th in crunch time offensive rating overall. They have turnover issues in that. And to, I don't want to say Ime Udoka's credit, I guess just to try and play devil's advocate here, when you start to really dig into their offensive data, there's not enough evidence or even a ton of evidence to say, well, Reed Shepherd comes in and they're better off. They're averaging 1.05 points per possession when Shepherd plays with KD, Amen, Şengün, and Tari Eason, which is so like that's their default starting lineup right now. They're at 1.16 points per possession when it's just Shepherd, KD, Amen, Şengün, and Jabari. That's slightly above average. You're at 1.48 for some reason, somehow, with Shepherd, KD, Amen, Şengün, and Josh Okogie. I think where the real issue lies here for me is I'm just wondering if in these instances, if the offense is ever going to be elite for a long enough time when it matters most, with both Amen and Alperen Şengün on the floor, given your other perimeter options who aren't KD or Reed Shepherd. And so now you start to dig into those numbers. The Rockets are scoring 1.24 points per possession when Shepherd plays with KD and Şengün and no Amen Thompson. The Rockets are at 1.19 points per possession when Shepherd plays with Amen Thompson, KD, and no Şengün. I'm not saying the answer has to be you pull one of those guys off the floor. I think if you had Fred VanVleet, and maybe you will in the playoffs, some of this changes, but I don't know that if you put Fred VanVleet in Reed Shepherd's spot, you're going to feel a lot better about Houston's crunch time. Never mind the process, but the offensive efficiency overall, given the personnel that you have, let's just say around him and KD.
They had Fred VanVleet when they were the number 2 seed last postseason, and they lost in the first round because they couldn't score. Like that. All right. So that this has been a diagnosable issue for a very long time. I think ultimately, I know you don't want to oversimplify it, but I kind of can just get on board with the current versions of Thompson and Şengün just don't give you enough downhill playmaking / shooting to make this work. And you can surround those guys with Smith and Shepherd, and like Eason's making threes. And I don't think defenses, it's just too easy for defenses to play this team dishonestly. They don't have to account for one or two key players. And like, this is the conundrum, right? Because Thompson is great at like a lot of things, and Şengün is great at a lot of things. And so the best version of the Rockets on balance, have them on the floor. But that just means that the best version of the Rockets is never going to be, you know, the best version of the Rockets is going to have these flaws just built in until one or both figure out how to have very different offensive games. So similar to the Pistons, but I would argue, and I think you would agree, more pronounced and more
It's a
like
10.
we've already seen it. It's a 10 because this is exactly why they got upset in the first round last year. And like,
And
what's different?
and the fact that you added KD and it feels like it hasn't changed
Mhm.
enough. And
He,
the other thing here is there were Pistons fans were not happy about this when I said I think this is going to be their best chance at winning a title is this season. The Rockets, even if you don't necessarily believe it, by default are in the same. I think you can, and I will make the case, even though I had that take about the Pistons. It's more inexcusable that the Rockets didn't do anything to
hmm.
address this need the trade deadline than the Pistons because the Rockets just traded for a 37-year-old Kevin
Yeah,
Durant.
good point. I was going to push back and say, well, but like the Pistons really, their ceiling is higher, but the Rockets, so they should have gone for MPJ because he really might. We would be talking about them, I think, very differently. The Pistons, if they had Michael Porter
They also
Jr.
had
in the
it
team.
felt like more of a clear go after that guy. Where with
Yeah,
Houston, because you wanted some creation, it was we talked about Michael Porter Jr. for them, but we also said like would Cade Cunningham be good enough? How good does this player need to
yeah,
be? But their timeline is inherently more urgent just because the person who has been no worse than their second best player, and that's
right,
putting it probably a little generously,
yeah.
is not going to be this guy that isn't going to be around forever. Just
Well,
that's how age works. He's
will
still
will
really
not
good
get
now.
better. Like won't get
Correct. There
better.
you go.
Like that's you might so like yeah, okay, Shepard might improve, but Durant, like sorry, he's
Might
just
come on.
if he
Let's not
holds
do this.
Shepard will become a supernova, but Durant will be lucky if he's this good next year. Like that would be great if he was this good next year. That'd be
Qu-
incredible. That
question:
shoot.
Who makes more? Who makes more All NBA teams for their career? Paolo Banchero or Reed Shepard?
mm, things aren't looking good for our guy Paolo at the moment. It's really bad that I'm hesitating. It's
I
really
know,
bad.
It's so fun.
Are we being serious? Is it still?
He plays in the East. It's going to be easier
Yeah.
for him to get recognition
I
there.
don't know, man. It's a question. I'll just say Reed Shepard for the take of it all. Okay. What's
It's
your
a 10
team?
for me with
It's a 10.
Houston, though.
It's a
Absolutely
10.
for sure. Now I don't know who to pick though, because this was easily going to be my next pick, and I wasn't. I mean, am I this guy? No, who do we do? Let's go to an Eastern Conference team.
Okay.
Let's talk Cavaliers.
Okay.
So the sample. James Harden's playing well for the Rockets. He has a broken thumb and is still shooting like 1,000,000,000% from three. The trade looks better just because now we've seen it in action, even though I'm a firm believer in if they don't win the title, I don't know how that trade ends up being a success, so short of Darius Garland is just never good
Yeah.
again. That being said, they're 17th in defense since Harden made his debut. They have close to a 118 defensive rating when Harden and Mitchell are on the court. Now, the caveat is, and by the way, what's concerning about that number is they haven't gotten unlucky on opponent threes, but they also haven't played with Evan Mobley a ton, and they're all of a sudden they're allowing .098 points per possession when he's on the court. So their base defense, I think, should be fine. It does help that Harden has some size and girth to him, and I think Mitchell, by and large, has been better defensively in Cleveland than he was for a lot of his time in Utah. My concern with this team is they are just uber reliant on Dean Wade remaining healthy and then Jalen Tyson defensively overall. And if not them, then you're kind of saying, oh, we need Keon Ellis or Dennis Schroeder to guard up. And I also just wonder if their guard situation, this would have been true with Darius Garland, unless you thought he wasn't going to play. But does having Harden and Mitchell all of a sudden, when you get to the playoffs, diminish by necessity your dependence on Sam Merrill, who's been excellent, already has fantastic chemistry with James Harden, and I think is better defensively than people give him credit for, but he's not a turn the water off wing. And that, I don't know if Jalen Tyson will ever get there. Dean Wade is probably the closest. It's one of those two, right?
Yeah.
The problem is they don't have that player, and I think you don't need to have that player necessarily, but when backcourt is built the way it kind of is, and you're going to run dual bigs a lot of the time, I think that that's going to matter. And so I'm very curious to see what their defense looks like in the playoffs. And even more curious, there are going to be minutes, presumably. Evan Mobley's at the 5. So what does it look like then? What happens with the rebounding? They're not even an incredibly great rebounding team when Allen and Mobley are on the court together. Presumably that's not going to get Harden might help there a little bit, but you're not going to get better if you downsize to Mobley at the 5. So there, I just find myself wondering if couldn't James Harden have like one of his best playoff runs ever? And we look back and say, yeah, like the Cavs just still weren't good enough to get past the Pistons or to get past the Celtics, who still with Jason Tatum coming back now have those extra wing bodies laying around or are more switchable on the defensive end, or even a team like the Knicks to where it's their defensive peak. I might argue at this point is higher than Cleveland's defensive peak. Just having Mikal Bridges, Jose Alvarado, OG Anunoby, if Deuce McBride gets healthy. I think Landry Shamet's been one of the more, kind of like how Sam Merrill is defensively for Cleveland. Landry Shamet is that for New York. It's, oh, no, like he's better and he's going to fight on defense more. Is that the concern you have? Is that the right one, or where did you land with that?
I think all what you're saying is plausible, where Harden could be great and everything else, several other things don't go right for Cleveland. And I'm glad you gave a lot of numbers, because my analysis of Cleveland is not like that thoughtful, because it starts and ends with they have James Harden. He will have to be great throughout the playoffs for them to be successful, and he's never done it. He's 2-12 and shooting 39% in elimination games. His list of, like, the thing I like to say is his playoff collapses will not be the leading sentence of his career epitaph, but they're going to show up no later than paragraph 2. They, like, that is next to changing the like concept of high usage offense with Houston and being one of the greatest, him alone offensive players of all time. He's defined by just, he has so many complete shit the bed games in critical moments. And
the ball just has to find him, Grant.
Why is that going to stop? Why is that going to stop, Dan? It's one of those, like, when it stops, I'll be happy for him. Hands up, go ahead. But I don't see it happening.
Oh no, finish your thought. Was that the end?
It's basically a long-winded version of saying I'll bet against it until he proves me wrong.
I think that's fair, but then I also kind of look at what's happened to Cleveland already in the postseason in the years prior. And if you were worried about what would you rather have, the James Harden you've seen who's on the court in these elimination games, or the prospect of Darius? I don't. By the way, if I was Cleveland, I would not have made the trade. But the counterpoint would be, or would you just rather have nobody in that spot because there's a real chance Darius Garland wouldn't be available?
I think the problem is what you're saying is still also right. Darius Garland is not exactly like goated as a playoff performer, and injuries have been a factor. Like, honestly, same for Donovan Mitchell. He hasn't made it. There's always, he's breaking down. He's playing, but he looks exhausted and hurt, or he just is hurt, and that's peppered in there against some incredible playoff performances, like going back to Utah even. Mobley has not been his best self in the postseason. Neither has Allen. So there's all these other, are they really up for this kind of questions that surround the Cavs? And then you're adding the ultimate, is he really up for this? Answer no guy in James Harden. So, like, concern level, like, what is,
so,
I mean, I don't know.
I have one.
Okay,
it might be a hot take. My concern level's like a 5 or a 6 here, just because Mobley, since he's come back, has looked pretty damn good. And so now that you have, even if James Harden's not playing well, I think the attention that he commands is, okay, are we kind of seeing that Evan Mobley is now, you and I were big on Evan Mobley can be the focal point of your offense and just your best player overall, and you're going to be a contender. I will say I haven't completely walked off that belief, but we are tottering on the edge. Doesn't mean Evan Mobley's not an all-NBA caliber player. Yep, look what he did last year. He was, where he finished 5th on my MVP ballot or whatever it was. But it doesn't feel like that's going to be a every season perennial type thing for him. That's why I'm ultimately going, and because he exists and the ability to play with him and Jared Allen exists, that I think the floor for your defense, if you go dual big with this team, can still be pretty high. I'll go 6 just to communicate that this team is still built rather weirdly. It's just
It
just a lot of you have your two bigs in Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, then it's just a bunch of non-wings,
yeah,
basically.
yeah. Would you I guess if you had to pick right now, do you think the Pistons or the Cavs are more likely to come out of the East?
I would say the Pistons, there's just more proof of concept of what they're doing, and you factor in the James Harden thing, and I think that there's just something. Maybe Mobley will prove me wrong over the course of the rest of the year. This Cavs team, other teams feel as if they're still built to win ugly. The Cavs do not. Like, it
That's a
just doesn't. Whether
yeah.
dual big, one big, it just doesn't. They don't seem built. Hashtag built for that.
I think I would agree with you. So what did you say the Cavs? I'll
I'll
go like
six just to.
yeah, I'll go 6 as well. I mean, I'll just go 7 because I really do think well, they haven't really proven anything either. Like the guys that are still there from their previous core. So there's that aspect of it too.
Yeah, it's
Um,
because you could even point to they kind of turned things around even before the Garland trade. They're
yeah.
like the best team in basketball since before the new year when you're looking at records. And it's you've reached the point. Who would be the best analog for this? Where it's like not like we've seen you dominate the regular season before. You have to prove it in the playoffs. It was probably a James Harden team. It's like
I mean, James Harden's Rockets. There you go. That's it. Okay, is it my turn or is it your turn?
It's your turn.
Okay, this one this has to be a collaborative one because this was really hard for me. I'm going to pick Boston. The obvious massive variable is Jason Tatum is going to be have played a game by the time you're listening to this. And does that just mean that Boston is now the best team in the East because they were already fairly close to that and they've
They
added
were already. They were. Could we both? We know we're gonna have to do the "We Were Wrong" and "We Were Sorry" podcast at some
oh
point.
my god.
That's not about that. And I think everyone was wrong about the Celtics. They were favored at sports books to win the East before Jason Tatum's return
Well, that's
became
pricing
official.
in his return.
I don't care. That's insane. They're on basically a 55 win pace and Jason Tatum has played 0 games and they did the full on tax ducking Super Mario meme maneuver where he's evading all the fireballs and like all the obstacles.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And they're just, we're on pace for 54, 55 wins. Ain't no thing. We're good.
I mean, so this is and having and I agree with you. So having laid that out there, I got to just like nitpick, I guess. And so what I landed on was just this Celtics team, and this is kind of an extreme version of what's been true for several seasons, just doesn't get the cheapies, which is to say they're dead last in rim attempt frequency and they're dead last in free throw attempt rate. So it makes you wonder. Now they make up for that with like an otherwise pretty high variance style, a lot of threes, not quite as extreme as it's been, but incredible Jaylen Brown 2-point jump shooting. It makes me nervous when a team doesn't get to the basket and this is very much related, does not shoot a lot of free throws because if you believe, and this has been largely proven to be true, that the increased physicality of the postseason and just teams scout you out of the first, second, and third most preferred offensive options in your arsenal. At some point, you kind of got to just get to the basket and bang around and get points that way. And Boston just does not do that at all. That's the best I got because this is a team that has blown away expectations, is wired as tight as any system wise, like understands how it needs to play to be successful, and is adding Jason Tatum. I don't know what to do with that team in terms of like, is there a structural flaw? You might point to the center rotation, I guess. Like Vucevic has looked mostly very bad. So it's Keita, and then you're going to play small or trust Luka Garza or whatever. I have a much harder time finding just this glaring thing like we can with Detroit or with Houston or even like with Cleveland. So I'm just pointing to, you guys don't get enough easy points. And that's the best I got. You got anything else there?
No, and I think to add to that is I'm not as worried. I've seen some people talk about it's not that is this Jaylen Brown's or Jason Tatum's team now? Like that's a first take conversation that I think was an actual first take conversation.
I'm sure it was.
The real conversation is, well, what does he look like and what's the interplay? Like, does it change their offense at all? Jason Tatum is so scalable, I'm not worried about it. And I actually view Jaylen Brown's experience running more pick and rolls than ever, more self-created shots than ever, as just, well, now they're better built for Jason Tatum to play off others, and he's always been able to play off others. They'll find that dynamic. I'd worry about what your point was. Jason Tatum was one of their best drivers of free throw attempts. You're probably not going to get that version of Jason Tatum. And if you do, I mean, holy crap.
Yeah.
I would nitpick a little bit about the center rotation as well. Are you going to be, just because you want some more heft, are you going to be dependent on Vooch? What does Kata look like in the playoffs? I think what you could also go a little bit more generally too is, all right, like right now you kind of need minutes from Baylor Shireman or Hugo Gonzalez. What do those guys look like in the playoffs? It's, the Derek Whites, the Peyton Pritchard, by the way, like he's getting more self-created up. Like that just sort of insulates them further against, no, they'll figure it out on offense. And you don't have questions about Pritchard and White and Brown and Tatum and maybe even Sam Hauser at this point. But that's half your rotation about. And I think the rest is, okay, well, what do they look like playing heavy minutes in a postseason rotation? And that to me might almost be the bigger concern, which underscores, I would give this pick whatever concern you want from the list that you laid out. I will give it I'll give it a 3.
Yeah, I think as we're talking about this, I'm realizing that my concern level is related to kind of the stakes of not winning it this year. And for the Celtics,
for sure.
I mean, it's not quite right to call it a found money season, because the circumstances that led to it, chiefly a catastrophic injury to your best player, are so unfortunate. Like there's nothing, like this isn't a lucky year in that sense, right? You don't want to have to have blown away expectations because your best player's hurt, but it still happened. I think the long-term outlook of Boston just is only better now, because it's pretty clear that Jason Tatum could come back diminished, and this team might still just be the team we go into next season viewing as on par with the Pistons as favorites in the East. So I'll give it a 2, because they had no business being in this conversation at all.
And so it's like, if we were coming into this with the Celtics entered the season as favorites in the Eastern Conference, your concern level is then probably like, why are Pistons concern level? Is it like granted, we didn't have them as favorites in the East either, but the expectations have soared as a result. And just with Boston, if they flame out and it was all done in service of, all right, now the team is willing to spend more because they ducked attacks. You got some sea legs under Jason Tatum. All right, cool. But if you really believe, because what's troubling there though, is if we go with a 3 and we went with an 8, 7.5, 8 for the Pistons, are we also effectively saying that we don't view the Celtics' peak as being on par with the Pistons' this year? The answer to that is no. I think Boston's peak is right there. I think Boston is the biggest threat to Detroit in the Eastern Conference. You can make the case for Cleveland. You can make the case for, there's cases for everybody.
Yeah.
So I do struggle with that, but like the expectations for Boston were lower coming into the season than they were for the Pistons, because they weren't dealing with, as you said, that catastrophic injury absence.
To that point, we kind of talked about the idea at the outset of, well, if you time traveled to June and said this team won the title, to qualify here, that can't seem impossible to you starting from today. If we were starting from October and you time traveled to June and someone said the Celtics won the title, what would you think? Like, well, they must have traded for Giannis, like, or something. Like, there's just no. So in terms of like the implausibility, if you go back to the beginning of the season, Boston is, I mean, it is insane that the Celtics are where they are right now. It's just unbelievable, and it's honestly cool. Like, that's great. This is awesome. I'm really it's exciting to me that this team that already has a title, by the way, is not done, because it's clear that they can weather what seems like the absolute most devastating, like catastrophic storm, and they look pretty good. Their 5-year time horizon looks pretty good to me.
And it's also just, they kind of are good substitutes for, because you look at Philly and Toronto and they're probably where we expected them to be, but Orlando is supposed to be in this exercise and just not. Right. And so Boston kind of subs in and replaces them, so it adds that wrinkle. My pick now, right?
Yep.
Let's go with, let's go to the Western Conference, and we're going to talk about the Denver Nuggets, which I think there's one of 2 ways you could go, and they're both more so general. Is you could say, are they going to be healthy enough
Mhm.
and then it's their defense. And I just feel like those two things are inextricably related
Right.
because their defense has not been great since Nikola Jokic has come back. He has looked way less than great on that
Mhm.
end of the floor, and it's brought. Have you given this any consideration? Do you think that he would have come back when he did if not for the 65 game rule?
Man,
Do
you
you
would
think
think
he's
that a
above that? Not based on his demeanor, but this is someone who's won a championship, he's won MVPs. I could see I'm not saying he's not competitive, but I think in my head, I always just assumed he's not gonna get caught up in all of that. But
yeah.
he comes back with a one-game cushion. It's made me think a little bit
He
about it.
is high on the list of guys I would assume don't care about that
Right.
stuff, but he did come back at a point where, yeah, he can miss one more. He's right under the wire right now. I I wanted to ask you, like, if you so the Nuggets have a title. Jokic has a title. He put to bed the narrative that I think a lot of people bought. I think I subscribed to it for a time before they broke through and won it all, that you sort of can't have a defense that's good enough to win a championship if he's in the middle of it. That died because he proved that, one, he was better defensively than a lot of people give him credit for, and has mostly that's been the case for the last several years leading into this one post championship.
Mm.
But this version of Jokic, that is an accurate statement, I think, because he has been so rough defensively where opponents take more shots at the rim with him on the floor than off, which has never happened before, at least since his rookie year. So, not a deterrent. That's never been the case. And certainly schematically, it's easier to get shots at the rim with this version of Jokic than it's ever been. And he's allowing like 64%, which is pretty rough among bigs that defend a lot of shots. So, it's like we've transported the argument from 2021 to today, and now it's kind of applicable where the Jokic at the middle of the defense, I guess, unless you get Gordon back and he's 100% and Peyton Watson is back at 100%, it's just not enough. I just don't think the defense is good enough.
I would agree. And now I'm going to explain to you why I think this is the right concern to focus on and why my level is just like a 2.
Okay, great.
I've seen, I don't know if you've seen this take spreading around. Zach Lowe said it, and so of course it spread like wildfire after it. And that's not to denigrate anyone who did it. I'm sure
Mhm.
we've parroted stuff that Zach Lowe has said all the time, but he just said this doesn't feel like the Nuggets' year, and now that has kind of spiraled into its own take. I
Mhm.
don't want to call BS. If they get healthy, why not? Is where so if
Yeah.
your concern is Aaron Gordon is never going to be healthy, Cam Johnson's never going to be healthy, Peyton Watson's not going to be healthy again. Yeah, I mean you lose 3 of your top 6, 7 players.
Mhm.
That's a problem. But
Sure.
the defense, we don't. Can you tell me how many games their would be starting 5 has played in together?
Oh, I think I know. It's like 10. Is it 10?
It's exactly 10,
Yeah, I
which
thought
there have been noticeably more than 10 games played this
quite a
season,
few.
Grant. I'm not sure if you know. So you start to dig into those. The Jokic stuff you're saying for sure. And the other thing that Denver doesn't have the luxury of, we've seen more turnovers from them than we're used to since the Jokic return, and they just don't have, even at full capacity, the raw athleticism to not get nuked in transition
Sorry, can
when
I
it
ask
happens.
you, because we've talked, I harped on the defense of Jokic. You're pointing out correctly the turnovers. There have just been more like, what the hell was that? Like turnovers from him since I just attribute that to the injury. And
That's
to
what I'm
your
just
point, like I think he came back too soon, and I think this is
that
the
or this
version
is
of him
his
you have, and it's not the real guy.
it's also the first extended absence of his
Hmm.
career midseason, and so he might take some time to work his way back.
Yeah.
And by the way, they're still like 10 points better per 100 possessions with him on the floor.
Of
Like
course,
whatever this version
he's
of
still
Jokic is.
great, like full stop
Yeah,
great. It's just this guy isn't. This isn't the best of Jokic right now, and I would retract everything I said about the defense, about their chances. If you could promise me, give me one of Gordon, give me Gordon, Watson, and it'd be nice.
well,
Johnson, it'd be
right.
nice, and Jokic being Jokic, and then my concern level is like a 1 or 2.
Well,
But I don't
and
know if
that's
we're
it
getting
for.
that.
So they have a top 11 defense against top 10 offenses on the season. Um, I mentioned before their starting 5 has only played 10 games together. They're in the 73rd percentile of defensive efficiency when that group's on the court. Small sample. Let's expand it a little bit. They're in the 95th percentile of defense when Aaron Gordon gets to play with Jokic and Jamal Murray. And I
Mhm.
think now you could point to it does feel like they have more difficult choices to make without a healthy Michael Porter Jr. there, because at least you could say he did feel like a roller coaster on offense. He certainly was a roller coaster on defense, but the rebounding was always there.
Mhm.
You're not getting that from Cam Johnson, and then he's had better stretches before he's gotten injured, but I don't trust him to make any sort of shot. Like, I've just
Yeah.
reached that point with
It's
Cam Johnson, which
bad.
is a weird spot to be in. So now you get into the push and pull of, well, who can you sub in there? What would make sense? Are we sacrificing too much if it's Peyton Watson? What if it's Bruce Brown? I think you can get away with the way that Cam Johnson has played this season. I don't know how much you're giving up by just throwing Tim Hard. If you need the offensive element or the
Oof. Yeah.
spacing, which I think
Yeah.
is important, I think you can get away sliding Tim Hardaway Jr. in there. And the sample size isn't huge, but I think the numbers on that lineup has largely been fine. This is all to say, when I watch Denver, no, I don't get the sense nightly that I'm looking at this championship juggernaut. We
Mhm.
haven't seen the version of the Nuggets that's supposed to be a juggernaut, at least nearly enough. And I understand that does then in turn lend itself to this. Well, this just doesn't feel like their year. And I'm just sort of wondering, I feel like is Aaron Gordon, are these injuries being treated differently if we're in the playoffs right now, based on how we saw them handle them in the playoffs
Yeah.
last season? And so, yes, these are big variables, but then I think that the focus should be, it's the injuries for me. Is Denver's defense good enough to win a title? Does Denver have an elite defense? There are certain lineups where they could probably get there, but the answer is just no.
Yeah.
They have the best offense in the league. They continue to have the best offense in the league on the year against top 10 defenses, despite Jokic missing a ton of time, despite inconsistency and scattershot availability from Cam Johnson. Heck of a job by Jamal Murray helping them navigate all of these stretches. It's not that I'm not that there isn't concern. I just think that we've swung a little bit too far on the opposite end of the spectrum to say, yeah, this just isn't their year. And until you tell me that Aaron Gordon specifically isn't going to be on the court during a postseason series, I just won't go there. And so I'm going to put, since I cited the defense, I'm going to trust that they will be healthier by the time we get to the playoffs. And I'm going to put my concern level at a 2.5, maybe a 3. And it's just, maybe if I had an MD, I feel more okay. Like, how are these injuries going to impact like what these guys look like or when they return? But I don't. So I get to go with a 2.5/3.
And I think I'm around there. I'll just say a 4 because I am very worried about Gordon's hamstring, and I think that is just like the defining injury for
Are
this
those important?
postseason.
Now, you were dealing with a hamstring injury. Have you recovered yet?
Yeah, but it moved to my calf because that's how injuries work when you're old. Is just you compensate and then you get hurt somewhere else. So, Godspeed, Aaron Gordon. He's much younger than me and slightly more athletic. So
Slightly more.
maybe he'll get through it.
Does he have more slam dunk titles than you? You guys are tied in that department.
How many does he have?
Not enough.
It's close.
That's the answer.
I was just gonna say, when Denver won its title, it had the number 17 defense in the regular season. Like, not a high bar, fellas. Like they if they get to there or prove that they have that slight like level up from that level in the postseason, I think they're okay. Just give me Aaron Gordon back. That's
I
kind of
think
the
they
main
just.
thing.
I think as Jokic gets better, the two things that will improve. Okay, you're not dealing with as many turnovers, so your defense isn't in throw like it worked itself into a tizzy because of that, and then his rebounding. They're good at ending, not giving up those second chance opportunities when they're at their peak. I will say though, as of right now, I think they're 25th in points allowed per possession on first chance opportunities. That is, you can't convince me that's not a problem. I just think that they have enough when they're healthy. Okay, the guys that are supposed to be playing, it won't be nearly as egregious when all of those guys are available.
All right, we got 3 teams left by my count. One of them I've run out of nits to pick. Like, I'm not, because the one I was going to pick has kind of corrected itself. The other one I just want you to talk about. So I'm going to get the Thunder out of the way here. And you got to play the hits. It's an oldie but a goodie. But the non-Shea minutes.
Thomas Sorber doesn't play enough. Oh, sorry.
No, I mean, and Ousmane Dieng was integral to their title hopes, and they foolishly sent him away, and he's going to be a superstar on the Bucks. It's the non-Shea minutes. It was still an issue last postseason. It wasn't a big enough one to offset all of the Thunder's myriad strengths in other areas. But Jalen Williams, banged up all year, not good relative to the standard he's set outside of the most recent stretch of play he had before his most recent injury. He looked pretty good before that hamstring got him. But coming into the season, had surgery on his wrist, shooting 31% from deep. The Thunder's non-Shea minutes with Williams on the floor this year, 113 points per 100. That's a 36th percentile figure, which is actually better than it was last year. It was 111 last season. You're still not encouraged by any of those because those are regular season numbers. The playoffs are harder. The competition's better, on and on and on. I don't think we can just dismiss the non-Shea minute concerns because the Thunder overcame them last year. And also, what else are you going to point to unless we just go to the health well again? I think it's still a thing, and I think it's magnified because Williams has had a very down, injury-plagued season. And if all of those other injury concerns don't kind of go away, that just makes his job when in the non-Shea minutes harder because he's got less healthy help, or, it's a trickle-down thing. So I don't really know where else to go with the Thunder other than the thing we talked about last year and have kind of focused on when we're looking for flaws with them basically forever.
Yeah, and look, they need. I think J-Dub is still the right focus because I don't want to say they could win the title without him. That's a possibility.
Yeah,
but it would be. I wouldn't pick them to win it if this is going to be the version they get, or certainly if they're not going to have him at all. His mid-range efficiency in the half court has dropped off by more than 10 percentage points. Last year, in transition, or he was shooting 72% in the paint and in the restricted area, 60% this year. And I mean, then you start to dig into it, or the Thunder's half-court offense is still above average overall when J-Dub plays without Shea, even though you mentioned they were the 36th percentile overall during those minutes. Chet, I thought maybe we'd see kind of a self-created jump from him. We haven't necessarily gotten that and the efficiency in those areas. He's in the 21st percentile of self-created shot-making efficiency. I don't know. My concern level isn't high. I think when you start to stack these minor issues on top of each other, so what J-Dub has looked like, overall health concerns, and then just the fact that they're not a high-volume three-point shooting team, and they're almost entirely bereft of what you would say are knockdown shooters. There's Isaiah Joe, and even he can be streaky. Other than that, it's like Chet Holmgren seldom has those games too, where it's at the game that they just won against the Knicks. Like that was sort of an anomaly for him when you're looking at that 3-point volume and efficiency. So when you stack those together, maybe I could get myself to a 4. Otherwise, I'm just kind of at a J-Dub's still young. I assume he's going to, maybe he never looks like a top 15 NBA player this season. The Thunder probably need him to be a top 50 or 60 NBA player to win the title. Like just having J-Dub on the floor, because still someone who can do things with the ball in his hands, or even having AJ Mitchell too would go a longer way. I'll settle in at a 3 because the stakes are still, it's a 3 because they don't look, remember at the beginning of the season when we said, they'll get to 74 wins, and they don't look, they have not looked like that team as often in the intervening months.
I'm going with a 1. And that's because, like, even this season, like you just said, we've seen them hit a level that nobody hits. So it's in there. And like you said, it's arguable that they don't need their second best player to win a championship. That just speaks to all the other stuff that they do so well. They're the favorite to me. I think it's been fun to imagine the Spurs, to imagine the Pistons, and like even Boston, all these other teams. But they still have maybe, the guy that's probably going to win MVP. They still have the best perimeter defenders in the league. It's just, they got so much that even if this is a major flaw, they overcame it last year. And so, I mean, who's to say they can't overcome something even more pronounced if Williams can't play, or if he's even worse. It's just, I think there's just going to be ways for the Thunder to solve this stuff. So I'm going, only 1 I'm going to give.
Who wins MVP if in the event that Shea and Jokic don't hit 65 games?
I think it comes down to the wire, and it's Cade or Wemby. Don't you?
Lakers fans are going to lose their shit if that happens. I don't disagree with your pick. So I kind of want to see that section of, not all Lakers fans, I want to see that section of Lakers fandom lose their shit because the 2 top candidates fell out, and I believe that a ton of them just would have, especially since Giannis doesn't qualify either, they would have Luka penciled into that.
Luka is so far from I know he's leading the league in scoring and the numbers are stupid and whatever. I'm trying to think who else I would pick over him for MVP, just based on like the total package of his season this year. Certainly Wemby and Cade. Then you get into what, like, who's the next?
Donovan Mitchell, probably.
Mitchell. Is Anthony Edwards a thought? Like, I mean, that's
Are you
maybe where
thinking? Are you thinking about Jalen Brunson?
I mean, I'm thinking Concanipple. Yeah,
LaMelo's shot quality, which is by no means his own fault, is so low.
right.
It's got to be LaMelo.
We need that stat. I know what is, like, if you, like, who makes it, what would you call it? There needs to be an acronym for it, for like self-imposed shot quality, SISC or something. I don't know what it is. All right. That's
we
the
also need a
Thunder.
metric for, I know they have rim deterrence, but there needs to be a different name for what Wemby does, because I feel as if the deterrence begins as soon as they cross half court. That stat needs a name.
I think it needs to be you need to be able to abbreviate it with fear, like FEA, or like forced exit around the rim or something.
Ooh,
like
you did
that.
it.
Like, hey,
forced exits around the rim. Fear.
Did it in one.
That's Wemby's. Could you have done it with Alien? Would have been good too.
A long interior, excellent netminder. How's that? Pretty good.
It's not as good as your fear.
It's a hockey goalie. Can you just nominate the Knicks, because I don't want to do it?
Okay, I'll nominate the Wolves. I'll nominate the Knicks. So my concern, I think people are going to be inclined to focus on the defense. Yeah. I'm not going to. They do have, I would just like to note, they are one of the teams that rank in the top 10 of both offense and defense. That also holds true. I believe they joined, I haven't checked this in a couple days, but I believe they joined the Pistons as the only team that ranks in the top 10 still of both sides of the ball when facing other top 10 teams. So I'm not
love the top 10 stats.
I'm not saying the Knicks should be favorites to win the title. I'm not saying, I am actually saying they shouldn't be favorites. I look at I don't even want to say it's their offense, but their starting five, the data is a lot better on it this season than it was last year. And even that, a lot might be doing a lot of work at this point because the margin is slowly shrinking. The offense isn't nearly dynamic. I've seen people say that a lot of Knicks fans thought the Knicks figured out how to use Josh Hart against these pack-to-paint defenses. They're just going to have him screen. They did that last year.
Stuff.
Right. Yeah. It's okay. And it works to an extent, but if you're having Josh Hart screen, here are the two primary trickle-down effects. Then you can't play him with Mitchell Robinson. And the numbers with him and Mitchell Robinson have actually been really good. But if you're not having Mitchell Robinson screen, it's just not going to work. Josh Hart hanging in the dunker spot does very little for me. The other thing, if you have him screening, you're now neutering Karl Anthony Towns' already topsy-turvy offensive usage even further. So it's, yes, have it in the tool belt, but it's a bigger deal that I think Mike Brown needs to be quicker with. Well, he hasn't had Josh Hart close some games to his credit. He's gone with Landry. He went with Landry Shamet, I believe, against the Thunder. He'll have another kind of tool in his belt once Deuce McBride returns. But there's just something about the offense, because even if you remove, teams won't guard Josh Hart, what is the offense? How many minutes can you get away with him? How many minutes are you willing to not play him in those instances? You then start to have these other concerns to where it's just like, who is the Knicks' second best player?
Might be OG.
But they probably need it to be Karl Anthony Towns, and just the self-created stuff from Towns this year has been better lately. He's passing out of more of his drives. Those are good things. He's never passed out of his drive, so I'm just skeptical as to how much that's going to hold. Their absence of a number two, it sometimes worries me more than like what the Detroit Pistons have, because the Pistons have a very clear thing. Cade Cunningham and Jalen Duren, and they will, if you let them get into that two-man chemistry, they will annihilate you with it. The Knicks do not have, aside from Jalen Brunson, go do this. That is the Knicks' defined. Yes, they do other stuff in their offense. I'm not trying to say that. The agency that players have to bring the ball up the court, there's definitely more leeway there. I do feel like we've seen anecdotally, don't have numbers on it, more half-court movement. The things that Mike Brown is just willing to try, playing Mohamed Diawara, mixing and matching all these different lineups, like seeing what works in the regular season, potentially to the detriment of their record. I can applaud all of that. The oversimplification is, who is the Knicks' second best player, and are they good enough, or do they have a number 2 option on offense? A viable number 2 option? And it can't be by committee.
Mhm.
I won't accept that answer. And it also can't be on some nights, Karl-Anthony Towns is that guy. If Karl-Anthony Towns isn't going to be that guy 75% of the time, you're going to have an issue. And so I think that's their biggest concern for me is just what are their counters on the offensive end to these defenses when you look at the Pistons, when you've even seen a little bit of it with Boston, San Antonio. I know they've played San Antonio well, but Cleveland, like these teams that have forced their offense into stretches to where it hasn't always looked great. What are the counters to that in the play? Do you have enough counters to that? And I honestly don't know the answer.
I think that that's a really interesting angle of approach because my first thought is, well, they have several counters, but you're right that it can't be by committee. So while it's valuable that Mitchell Robinson will probably win you a game in any given series just because he gets that many offensive rebounds that turn into threes, like that's okay. You got one that way, and Brunson's great enough at the do it all yourself to where maybe he gets you 1.5 wins, in a given series or two. And then it's like, where's it coming from otherwise? And Towns is as likely to torpedo a game as he is to help you win it, right? So the same, it's kind of, I think that's well observed. And I think maybe what it's reflective of is the Knicks are really good, but the ceiling just doesn't quite reach high enough because they don't have that second guy that is a reliable enough source of like every night help for Brunson. I think that's really interesting. I think that
It's a
feels true to
9,
me.
by the way, for me,
Okay.
because I just don't, as good as they can look at points, and even, they've shown their defense. They have the league's best defense like the last quarter of the season. They've gotten
Right.
very lucky on opponent 3-point shooting during that
Okay.
stretch. They have had games where opponents have outshot them from 3 and they've still kind of defended well, but you even kind of look at their record if they're shooting below league average from 3. I haven't looked at this, so I'm just going to guess. I would guess their winning percentage last year or even the year before was way higher when they shot below league average from 3 than they do this year. It's just they seem so reliant on it, in part because you don't have, like, that's the high variance shot when you
Mhm.
don't have another number 2 guy. And it's, they're all like Karl-Anthony Towns, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby do elements of it, but it's all, you needed it all in a fuller package or at least a more consistent package, which I just don't
Yeah.
think they're going to get. And so that's a 9 for me. And maybe that overlooks some of the defensive concerns, but if you have a team that's built around Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns, you're supposed to be unsolvable on the off. That's what you've decided you're going to be. I don't get that unsolvable vibe from the
Yeah.
Knicks. And it goes beyond, to be clear, just how defenses are going to treat Josh Hart. And they're going to treat him that way even if he shoots 4 of 7 from 3. He's hit more of his wide open threes this year. He's still below 36% on catch and shoot threes for
Mhm.
the season. Defenses they're not going to care.
He's a great example of like the percentage matters until it doesn't, because he could go if in game 1 of a series he goes 5 for 8 from 3, the defense will not treat him any differently the next night. Like
Nope.
that won't change the scheme, I don't think. Maybe if he does it twice, that's like the tipping point. But yeah, I do want to talk. You talked about the the Brunson cat pick and roll on offense. Suppose it should be unsolvable, and it's not. I do want to discuss what I was gonna focus on until like most of the Knicks defensive numbers just got so good that it felt silly. The other end of the floor, where like I, I really do think one of my favorite parts of the postseason is teams X and Y show up with their game plans, and they kind of show they go out there doing what worked, and then as the series progresses, you find out what does and doesn't work, and there's adjustments and counters, and eventually you're playing a series that maybe doesn't look like what you hoped it would, but this is just where you are now. And to me, with Brunson and with Cat as attackable options in pick and roll defense, my thought was that teams are going to come into series against the Knicks on offense knowing exactly what they want to do. And some of the numbers are not good, like rollman 37th percentile. The Knicks defend rollman at a rate or allow scoring by rollman in the 37th percentile. It's 27th for ball handlers. It's bad. Why isn't the concern just that offenses in the playoffs can pick on those two guys and the Knicks don't really have a fix for it? And again, the defensive numbers have been good enough to where it's like, is that really what you're going to talk about? But that just strikes me as tactically where you would start as another team, and why should we believe the Knicks can overcome that on defense?
If they get into a situation to where that can consistently be attacked, they can't.
Right,
What I
but they're
think that they've done a good job doing is, and there's been a lot of talk recently about they're shading teams more towards the baseline. That can make it harder to attack that. I think what they've done a really good job of all season is Jalen Brunson, like having him be cross matched with anyone that allows him to be the low man. And so if you want to try and go after Jalen Brunson, it's going to take more work to get to him. Mike Brown has gotten the unit I want to see more of. Like the staggering patterns with them, I think can help too. A lineup I want to see more of is Jalen Brunson with Mo Diawara, Jose Alvarado, OG Anunoby, and then a Robinson. I would say like just throw a bunch of defensive dogs around Jalen Brunson. But I think what we've also seen from Towns and the data on the rim attempts that he's contesting during this span, when the Knicks' defensive shift kind of happened, what also happened was, well, they're not asking Karl Anthony Towns to be the traditional rim protector as often anymore. And I think there's just more chaos if he's coming up higher, and he just seems more engaged when he has to beat. Like, if you involve Karl Anthony Towns in the action, I actually think, and he's up high, he's going to be better off because just like the way he tries to keep pace with players or just how engaged he is. Not always going to end well. Guys are going to get by him. He's going to foul people.
Yeah.
But I prefer that than to like, let's funnel anyone towards the middle, or cats and drop, or cats hanging around the basket.
Yeah.
I'd rather have Jalen Brunson as the low man than Karl Anthony Towns.
He's like, going to take 14 charges a game if he's down there enough. Yeah.
So I don't know that that's necessarily, I don't know that that should make you or anyone else specifically feel better about it, but I think that they've circumvented it enough. But it's also, let's see it in the playoffs. And it's now you have to go up against who is better or more prone in the league to trying to suss out a mismatch than James Harden, who's now in your conference. It's maybe Luka will like get bogged down into that. So we'll see. I mean, their defense is, the numbers are cool. I'm gonna put like, can they reach and maintain that level in the playoffs when all you're facing is top 10 teams, basically?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good answer. That's why I kind of backed off of it as the main concern. Is that I think the main thing that you pointed out is just that like teams are good enough now, in the Knicks case, for example, to just figure out how to keep those guys out of actions together. Like there's enough pre-switching you can do and all that stuff. It's still maybe the bigger concern though, as you mentioned, is just a team just ISO hunts one or the other. And that's a lot harder to keep guys out of actions if it's just like, let's find this guy and call him up and see if it's Brunson, for example, and probably teams should just do that against Brunson all the time to wear him down, because then that gets into the other thing that you mentioned about if he's not doing everything on offense, or if you're forcing it out of his hands all the time too, like who are you that afraid of on the Knicks from a scoring perspective? Not many.
So I went with a 9 on mine. Where are you at?
I'll give it like a 7. We've seen the Knicks kind of overcome that to some extent in recent postseasons, but it's still, that's still pretty high. We have one.
Who's our final? And it's your pick.
It is. It's the Timberwolves. When I wrote about this, what I went with was that they were, I think it was 13, they're 12-14 at the time against teams with winning records. And so I just using that as a proxy for the type of competition they'll see in the playoffs. Haven't seen enough. Generally, I looked it up, and the last several champions, going from OKC to Boston to Denver and on back farther, they're always just, 25-10 or whatever against teams with winning records. It does bear out that how you perform against teams that are 500 or better during the regular season really does, shocker, impact how well you fare against the very good teams you see in the playoffs. The Wolves are now 16-15. That's not like championship caliber, but it's now you're winning more often than not against winning teams. And if you want to throw in the peaking at the right time cliche, I think that's starting to apply to them as well. This is a weird team. We've talked about them in the context of like a why not kind of conversation when you're talking about a champion. 2 straight conference finals. Gobert anchors the defense. His playoff usefulness or lack of playoff usefulness on defense has been wildly overstated. I guess you could point to, is their offense good enough with him on the floor to, win the 4th playoff series it'll take. They're 58th percentile overall with him. The best lineups are 65th, 71st, 90th percentile on offense with Gobert on the floor. Pretty encouraging. Edwards is a kind of playoff proven guy. The role players make sense. We could go with the secondary creation stuff. DiVincenzo's not a point guard. You're a little reliant on Julius Randle unless you think Bones Highland is going to really continue to be a source of offense. I guess if I had to lean somewhere, it would be the offense, but we've done that for like 4 of these teams, so I'm hesitant to go that way. But that's all to say that the Wolves, for a team that hasn't actually won anything, and for a team that has had ups and downs in each of the last 3 regular seasons that have caused us to like dismount the bandwagon very quickly and then see if we can catch back up to it just as fast. I have a weird amount of faith in Minnesota. I think, like, do you feel the same way where it's, you got to do some real squinting and real stretching to find a fatal flaw or something that feels like a fatal flaw, unless you truly, and maybe this is it, just offensively at the end of games, they just bog down sometimes and it's a mess, and that's going to be a problem. But this team there's a lot to like here. I don't know what else to say with them. What are your thoughts?
I was going to go with the reliance on Rudy Gobert defensively, because what if there is a matchup to where his offense, and if Julius Randle's not having a great game, like how do you accommodate that? You can't. You just decide, well, Julius Randle's the one we're not going to play. No, it might be, well, how many minutes are we going to be able to get out of Rudy Gobert there? And is your defense built to hold up after that? Because they are like 13 points better per 100 possessions when he's on the court defensively. And the fact that they're 7 points per 100 possessions worse offensively with him on the court, he is still just a decidedly net positive. And it's funny that, because I'm with you that we spend a lot of time talking about the secondary ball handling, how much the ball needs to be in Ant's hands, what happens in crunch time. Is it how, I think Io, someone who could help, like kind of a pace changer, and like that the Wolves' second unit feels like it might be playing faster lately. You look at what Dante DiVincenzo could do, the season that Bones Highland is having. Who are their above average defenders on this team? There are Rudy Gobert and Jaden McDaniels, and then Anthony Edwards sometimes.
When he needs to be. Yeah.
When he needs to be. And so maybe because that is 60% of your starting lineup, it's just, or preferred closing unit, it's a non-issue. And it's not like Dante DiVincenzo is a sieve. So, but this isn't a team that, like, their defensive identity to me is just very much Rudy Gobert still at this point. You could sense moments when you're watching the Wolves that the guys who are guarding on the perimeter seem like they forget Rudy Gobert is not behind them with kind of the angles that they're ushering in, and there could be these open pathways to the basket. That's just my biggest concern. And maybe it shouldn't be, because you're not going, like, because my concern level might actually be pretty low, because the best version of the Wolves, regardless of how you feel about Rudy Gobert, includes Rudy Gobert. And so if you're worried about their reliance on, it's sort of saying, man, I'm worried about how, but I guess it's, could you say, or is it not the same, that because we're worried about the Pistons' over-dependence on Cade Cunningham, can you frame it the same way on defense? Or is it over-dependence on offense is more dangerous than an over-dependence on defense?
I think that's an interesting way to think of it. I guess I am more just generally, if you take the Gobert specifics out of it, I think I'm probably more concerned with a team like the Pistons that just, if it's not this one guy, where's the offense coming from? Because defensively, I guess in theory, if let's say, man, it's tough to put a defensive lineup out there without Gobert that you feel good about, right? Because if it's like Reed at center, not great. That's a real concern. Even if McDaniels and Edwards can kind of turn some of the perimeter water off, that's no way to live. So maybe what we're arriving at is really just the importance of Rudy Gobert is concerning. But then is that even fair? Like, because
couldn't you just, is the importance of Julius Randle more concerning? Is it, shouldn't it be a bigger deal that he's at 31% from 3 or whatever it is?
Swap Randle out for Naz Reid, and that lineup this year is a plus 25 per 100. So like,
okay.
But I mean, that's a tiny, it's like 160 possessions. And if we're going to be worried about the Wolves shot creation, taking Randle off the floor is like, that's not a solve. Like, Reed is not going to create shots for other people. So I guess what I'm hung up on is the feeling that Gobert still on both ends of the floor, much more so on offense, just puts a weird set of limits on what you can do, and that eventually a team is going to exploit that. But is that fair? Like, is it is it fair to? Does it
Well,
matter that the
what
Wolves? I don't know.
what after I've watched this team, I've seen a lot of their crunch time, and I worry about their offense, which has now creeped to above average in crunch time. And I was
Mhm.
looking this up because you said when you were talking about Gobert, you like the top 10 stats. They're second in points scored per possession against top 10 defenses.
They're just going to win the championship then,
They're
right?
just
Is
like
that where we're landing?
is the concern that we can't settle on a singular
Yeah.
concern for this team?
I mean, because let's try another angle. If they wound up winning it, you would say, well, yeah, that makes sense. Anthony Edwards just kept getting better, and now he's someone we'll just talk about as a champion, and he's a top 5 guy going into next year because he proved it in the playoffs again. Like, right? Like that narratively done. Dust your hands off. Made sense. We got there. I just I still think the Thunder are better. But after
Correct.
that, you can't point to a team that is indisputably more dangerous than Minnesota. I think it's at least a conversation with absolutely everybody else. And we're reflecting that because we can't find other than Gobert something related to Gobert feeling wobbly. But other than that, I don't know where to go with
I
them.
j- I wanted to go before when we were coming into this because is Julius Randle is the type of player where I feel like if you just looked at his numbers or didn't watch him regularly, you feel a lot better about him if you're unplugged from what other people are saying than if you sit back and watch him. It's sort of
Yes.
if you look at Carl Anthony Towns' numbers, well, it's all-star, man. They couldn't even make
Hmm.
All-NBA. And then if you watch every third, every fourth, every fifth Carl Anthony Towns game, whatever it is, you feel differently about them despite the numbers.
Hmm.
So I can't like I wanted to harp on Julius Randle, but even the 3-point shooting, especially not great post trade deadline. But it's sort of they have a 121 offensive rating when he's on the court without Anthony
Yeah.
Edwards. I don't know, like what more do you want from the Julius Randle experience?
No, I have not liked Randall as a player basically forever because vibes. Just because the ball stops, I don't love that because of the pound the dribble stuff sometimes, but he's an effective offensive player that like from the moment they traded for him, it was like, I get it because he's a front court guy that can set people up. Like that matters on this team that has one guy in Edwards who took a couple years to learn how to do that, and they don't have anyone else you really trust to do it. So I think I think you're right that like there's something that's like a little itchy about the trusting Randall too, but I don't know, man.
And that might I think what we've done is had this circular route back to it is I don't know if it's the secondary ball handling or just the creation because when you look at the way that Julius Randle sets up his teammates or Dante DiVincenzo or an Io DeSunmu, Bones Highland might be the closest they come to just having okay, this is an on-ball wiggle guy who can set up guys in the half court with in a bunch of different ways. Whereas
Mhm.
Julius Randle and Io DeSunmu is very much predicated on we need to get all the way downhill to
Yeah.
maximize it for the
Yeah,
most
and
part.
they'll see the one pass that's available. They're not like breaking the geometry of the floor and like creating lanes for they're if there are levels to facilitation, they're not at the top level of the type of that you might want as a secondary facilitator. That's I don't
Can
know.
we just could we agree to settle on that we all thought that Terrence Shannon Jr. was going to be better with Nikhil
Yeah.
Alexander Walker
Oh God.
leaving?
If they had Alexander Walker, we wouldn't even have to do this section
Would
because
you
they would
pick
have no
if you put
flaws.
Nah on this team right now? Would you pick them over the Thunder based on your concern level with J Dub?
They would rise to because I said that it's at least a conversation between them and everyone but the Thunder. They would rise to it's now a conversation between them and the Thunder. That's how sincere my appreciation for Nah
There's I
is.
don't know that there's a great way to quantify because you even mentioned their record against good teams, and they're one of 4 teams with a winning record against
Right.
top 10 teams.
They
So it's
corrected
just
it.
I think there's a Jekyll and Hyde element to them, and
Mhm.
maybe that's just the concern. And
Mhm.
given what we've seen the past 2 playoff runs, which have, by the way, encompassed 2, I would say, very different core elements of the team, where you go from Karl Anthony Towns to
Right.
Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. They made the conference finals anyway. Could you argue that have there been one too many changes now? With now you do lose Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Ayo Dosunmu is sort of a straight to DVD version of that. We'll find out. And it's like the Bones Highland story. It's one of those situations where like that's really cool. He's finding his footing in Minnesota, and I don't feel good about that at all for Minnesota when you're looking at what their level of reliance could be on him in any given game during the playoffs. Yeah. I'm gonna go with there's something here, so I'm just gonna go with a 4, but I don't feel strongly about it.
I'll go a 5. But I don't have any. We have yet to pinpoint the reason for our concern level. If you could de-age Mike Conley by like 5 years, can you imagine? If it's just if you just had that guy,
who are the guys that could shift the championship race if you just de-age them 5 years?
Let's see. You only get 1 per team.
Yeah, 1 per team.
I mean, LeBron's got to be on that. Like
LeBron for sure.
If he's 5 years ago, LeBron. I mean, probably Al Horford. The Warriors would definitely be just absolute front runners.
Could you also say, what about Draymond?
The whole roster? Could you de-age the entire roster by 5 years? That'd be cool.
Yeah, Mike Conley would definitely be up there.
I mean, Durant. It's going to be all the guys you'd expect.
Russ in Sacramento, we think. Yeah,
5 years. You might need to go a little farther back. Yeah, I mean Harden. Well, how good was Harden 5 years ago? Is that? Are we back at?
He was still Harden? he was all NBA shoe-in type rather than will he make an all NBA team?
Is there anybody on the Bucks you could de-age 5 years to give Giannis a real run? Probably
not.
Man,
what if you were to have de-aged before he was traded Anthony Davis 5 years in Dallas?
Yeah, now and then you're talking. Because that's
I don't know
that's
what
like
de-age him 5 years in Washington, and I'm not entirely too sure.
Well, if you de-age Trae Young 5 years, you get conference finals Trae Young, don't you?
Now, if you de-age the rest of the Wizards roster, I think you get a bunch of minors that
you get a bunch of 8th graders out there. That's not great. You don't want that. All right. Well, we did it. Got anything else?
What's the contender that has the biggest red flag? Or, well, honestly, what was the hardest contender to leave off? Or what was the hardest team to leave off?
Well, just by record and odds, it's the Lakers and Sixers. The Lakers, it just lightning round. That defense is not good enough for the playoffs, and all your best players are great on offense, and that's a problem. And for the Sixers, it's just what is it for the Sixers? You need Embiid to be MVP level. Embiid to be.
You also just have no like the wing shortage on that team. It's got like properly sized wings. Also, the maxi minutes without Embiid and George have kind of come back down to earth. VJ Edgecombe has come back down to earth. There's a list of concerns. The hardest team for me to leave off, and I really, truly mean this, was the Charlotte Hornets. I don't have any faith in Orlando. Do you know what's kind of a bummer with the Lakers? Is they just don't. I've never been more drawn to the Lakers than other teams just because they're the Lakers. But a team that has LeBron James and Luka Doncic should be far more interesting.
It should.
Than the Lakers actually
Shouldn't
are.
It? You know, I agree. Like, and
I blame Alejandro personally. I think that's the.
I keep looking at the record and I'm like, that's a lot of wins. That's
everyone needs to stop sipping on the crunk juice, and maybe they'll be more just like everyone's just too buzzed on crunk juice.
Yeah, the Lakers' biggest weakness is their center is 3 people. That's fun. All right. I think it's time now to thank everyone for listening, for watching. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Let us know. I'm sure we missed something, or if any of these really resonated, let us know in the comments here. Join our Discord, links for that in YouTube and podcast description. You can weigh in there as well. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. Shouts, Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jared Allen.